Hello, and welcome to PHEN's Managing Your Survivorship meeting on this Wednesday, the 10th day of January. I think the first thing I want to do is to wish everybody a happy new year, 2024. So that's a beautiful number, and we are all so blessed to be here. So I want to welcome those of you who are here with us at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston. And I want to welcome those of you who have joined us online. It is so good to see you online. You know, I have this vision that I can actually see you. It's a vision in my mind of everybody watching their computer screen to learn and to understand things that they need to know to manage prostate cancer survivorship. We have a program tonight, and my name is Thomas Farrington. I am the founder and president of PHEN. We have a program tonight where we're covering 3 areas. We're going to cover newly diagnosed men and your risk levels and what some of the treatment options are. Right. We're going to then, and Dr. Jim Smith is going to do that presentation. And you've heard Jim. He was here with us last month. He's one of our ambassadors. And Dr. Smith is a man that will really help you understand and show you how to use our tool, PHENPath, to look at the treatment options. And then after Dr. Smith makes his presentation, Dr. Keith Crawford, our Director of Clinical Trials and Patient Education, will talk to you and present on clinical trials. You know, there's some exciting things happening in the world of clinical trials as we develop new treatments and therapies for patients. So we have been involved with that. Dr. Crawford is going to talk about some of the successes in clinical trials that's been witnessed in the prostate cancer world, and really how PHEN has participated with some of those trials. And then we're going to look out the things that we see coming up that are there for us in 2024. And after that, we have a patient. We always like to have a patient story. We find that, you know, you can learn a lot from patients who are really traveling along their prostate cancer journey. So we have Mr. Arcane, who is one of the patients and a member of the PHEN network, who's going to talk about his story and his journey with prostate cancer, and especially his journey on a prostate cancer clinical trial. And then after that, we're going to have a man-to-man session, but that man-to-man session will be here at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in person. So that's the program that we have outlined tonight. As I said, 2024 is an exciting year. We have a number of programs planned that we will be talking with you about each month as we move across. We will highlight certain of those programs, certain of our resources and tools that are available to you. So continue to watch your screens as I see you, and get prepared for our presentation. So this time, I am going to bring on Dr. Jim Smith to get us started. Dr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Very good. Good evening. Let me share my screen. There we go. Excellent. Well, first, let me thank Mr. Farrington, Dr. Crawford, our sponsors, and all of you in attendance. I think tonight's going to be a very important session. We're starting from the beginning. We laid a groundwork at our last meeting. And let me preface my statement before I get rolling. Let me just say that any clinical decision is going to be made by you and your treating team. We are education and awareness so that when you interact with your medical provider, you are informed. PHENPath is an excellent site for education and awareness. And so this evening, we're going to jump into understanding your risk level when you're newly diagnosed. Let me scroll down to the pyramid. This pyramid is extremely important because it lays the foundation of understanding what you need to know as you look at treatment options. I'm a psychiatrist by training, health educator by passion. And the bottom line is, when we receive that diagnosis of prostate cancer, we are a bit overwhelmed. But the pyramid of this PHENPath and these treatment pathways section really gives you the tools to understand what to do. We start out knowing what our PSA is. All right, that's number one. Number two, your biopsy results. You've got to know this. Then the biopsy results lead you into the Gleason score and the grade of the cancer. And then finally, the cancer stage. Now, tonight we're going to be talking about a very low risk, and very low risk, as defined here, patients with an initial diagnosis of a PSA of less than 10, a Gleason score of 6 with grade group 1, and less than 3 biopsy cores positive for cancer. Right? Cancer found by needle biopsy and that cannot be felt during exam, and this is stage 1. So let me repeat that. A PSA of less than 10, a Gleason score of 6, grade group 1, and less than 3 biopsy cores positive for cancer. All right. So remember your pyramid: prostate, a PSA, biopsy results, Gleason score, grade group, and the cancer stage. Now let me back up a bit to another screen. When we talk about that very low risk, right? We talk about what happens in terms of treatment options. Now, this is extremely important. Years of life expectancy. And I'm going to click on that in a minute, but let me just go to the nitty gritty. If you have a life expectancy of less than 10 years, the treatment options are as such: a history and physical exam every 12 months or as needed, a PSA every 6 to 12 months for 5 years, then every year, and a DRE or digital rectal exam if the suspicion of reoccurrence. If you have a life expectancy of 10 to 20 years, active surveillance is an option. The PSA should be done at least every 6 months, along with a digital rectal exam and a repeat biopsy. But what's also added is the parametric MRI. And that is so important in terms of helping an individual figure out what they need to do. If your life expectancy is 20 years or more, active surveillance for many people is preferred. However, again, that's your individual decision. But we also see at that point options open up: external beam or radiation therapy, brachytherapy, radical prostatectomy, with EBRT or EBRT with androgen deprivation therapy, or monitoring with consideration of early irradiation for detectable and rising PSA, or a PSA of greater than 0.1 nanograms. So let me step to the life expectancy table. And as you see here, from 0, I'll use myself. I'm 73, and let me scroll down. So if I'm diagnosed with prostate cancer at 73, I'm looking at a life expectancy table of 11.6. Now, you also throw in family history. Dr. Crawford's going to talk about genetics. In my situation, while my dad had benign prostatic hypertrophy, there's no prostate cancer in his family or my mother's family. None of my brother doesn't have it. So clearly, and my dad made it to 91. So I have some decisions to make with that diagnosis, but I was considering myself in that category that I have to kind of have my own come to Jesus meeting about what I want to do, but I'm going to be informed by having my treatment team give me all the options available, and then I can make an informed decision. So let me just repeat real quick, and then I'm going to pass the baton on to Dr. Crawford. When we look in treatment pathways, you see the initial diagnosis of prostate cancer. You come up to this next screen. Tonight we're talking about a very low risk. So again, PSA of less than 10, Gleason score of 6, grade 1, and less than 3 biopsy cores being positive for cancer. And so this is what we need to take, and then add to that your life expectancy using the table that we have here in the PHENPath website. So less than 10 years, you see what you should consider. 10 to 20, what you should consider. 20 or more, what you should consider. So, any questions from that so far? All right. No questions? Okay. Well, then I will pass this on to Dr. Crawford to take us into the next level. Shall I stop sharing my screen?
Thank you, Dr. Smith. You can stop sharing now.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask Jerry to bring up PHENPath again. What Dr. Smith did was to talk about one of our portals, PHENPath, and information that you can find on that. I want to highlight that the treatment options and information that you see on PHENPath is based upon the guidelines from the National Comprehensive Cancer Network. That's important. These are not some options that we got together and came up with on our own. These are the guidelines that are followed, that are developed for doctors. And so what we've done with PHENPath is we've created a tool that allows patients to understand the information that doctors use. The doctor's guidelines, when you look at those guidelines as patients, you would not understand those. So we have brought those out so that you are able to see and understand these. But as Dr. Smith pointed out, if you look at PHENPath, and I'm going to take the time, a couple of minutes to go through this, because part of what we want to do is to make certain that you understand how to use the tools. Dr. Smith talked about the treatment option of very low risk, but I want to make sure that you understand this tool, that you can go to phenpath.com and see, if you're newly diagnosed, you can click on that and see the information that Dr. Smith presented. Now, in addition to that, there are many other options there that we're not going to touch tonight, but we will get to those during this year. But I do want to go back to that pyramid, Jerry, that Dr. Smith showed. And it's there, as he's pointed out, this information is very critical when you have to make a decision on your stage, where you are when you're newly diagnosed with prostate cancer and what your treatment options are. But as you scroll down, there's some things that I want you to be able to see beyond, just keep going. In PHENPath, okay, you can stop there. PHENPath, I want you to use this as your study guide. Again, information is there, phenpath.com. You can go study this, but in the pyramid, there's information there about your PSA number. You need to know what that is, your biopsy results, your Gleason score, your grade groups, and also your stage, okay? So all of that information is there for you on PHENPath.com. And you can see the anatomy. So if you're not familiar with where the prostate is, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer over 20 years ago. And when I was diagnosed, I didn't know what the prostate was, didn't know what function it served. But so I would have loved to have had this tool to be able to go and find this information and study that. So when you go to that pyramid, when you go to that page, really look at all of this information, and it's there. And keep going down, Jerry. In addition to that, we have a glossary of information and terms. So there's a glossary within PHENPath. So the things that you need to know when you're newly diagnosed with prostate cancer, we think we have them here. As I said, they're based upon the guidelines that doctors use. So, this is what they have. And so I think we have all that information in a patient-friendly format. So please use this information, PHENPath.com. So thank you. Now with that, I'm going to, if you have any questions, you can always pose those questions online. But now I'm gonna bring up Dr. Crawford. He's gonna talk to you about clinical trials. Dr. Crawford.
So this is very important for us to understand. We spoke about PHENPath, but did anyone know in the room that clinical trials are part of your treatment options? So I don't see any hands going up. There was one, two. So we're going to talk about clinical trials now. First, I'm going to give you some information about clinical trials that have already taken place. Now, remember, we work with industry and academic leaders throughout the United States. And there's something else about what we do at PHEN. Each month, the PHEN team curates, looks at all the actively recruiting clinical trials in the United States. And what I'll do is show you PHEN trials afterwards. But we keep track of all the actively recruiting clinical trials, and especially those that we consider to be important and that our network, the PHEN network members, should be interested in. So the first thing I wanted to tell you about is very interesting, and I just thought about it today. In 2003, there were two events that I consider to be historic. The first event was the completion of the sequencing of the human genome. Now, that was all the genes in the human body, 99+% of the genes were sequenced. So that means we had information about those genes. And then we could use that information in the future to understand disease, how it's transmitted, and how to create treatments. And the second is the establishment of Prostate Health Education Network. Now, today, we're at this nexus, at this joining point. What I wanted to show you here is in the early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of treatment options that were available. They were still doing clinical trials, but there weren't a lot of treatment options that are available. But 2024, we have a full tool chest of treatment options that are available. So that's why I gave you this image here. So you can see that it's complicated. There's a lot of stuff that's available, and we want to personalize and tailor your treatment options. So first, what are clinical trials? Now, you'll be able to go to phentrials.com to get a little bit more detailed information because we have some educational videos that are there. But just to keep it simple, it's just clinical research, medical research. Now, after people have looked at the information and studied the information and the Petri dish at the bench and then in animals, then they move selected studies and findings and move it into the human setting. So into the clinical setting. Why? Because once you find out that these discoveries could be of benefit to human beings, you want to use them. So we know that this is the case. There's something else that you have to remember. When you look at a clinical trial or when you participate in a clinical trial in cancer is not going to give you a sugar pill. They compare the new cutting edge technology with the standard of care. And so I always use this analogy, this metaphor of the standard of care being 3 scoops of ice cream, chocolate syrup, nuts, and whipped cream. And the clinical trial is 3 scoops of ice cream, chocolate syrup, nuts, whipped cream, and a cherry. So you're always going to get the standard of care. Other thing about clinical trials, there are 4 phases. And again, I will refer you to PHENtrials.com, and we have videos there that will go in complete details about this, but there are 4 phases. Phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. The larger clinical trials, phase 3, and after phase 3 results, then it goes out into the marketplace. So why should Black patients be extremely interested in participating? What do we know about this? We know that clinical trials represent cutting edge technology, that cherry on top. It's a concierge medical care. Do you know, and anybody in the audience here and online, you will get the best treatment if you participate in the clinical trial. We're not saying that you're not, if you're in a private sector or private practice, you're not going to get the standard of care. But in a clinical trial, you will get the best care. It's like concierge medicine, because you're going to have multiple groups looking at your information and making sure they keep track of everything that's going on with you. And then the majority of clinical trials, they're at no cost to you. And if there is a cost, it may be a minimal cost. Now, this is very important because the more Black men are involved in clinical trials, the more information that's collected that'll be of benefit to you, to your family, and to our community. And the last point I wanted to make here is this, and Tom brought this up earlier. The information that we present to you is from the National Comprehensive Cancer Network, NCCN. These represent a collection of groups throughout academic center, medical cancer centers throughout the United States that get together and design the treatment guidelines that your doctors will be using. So this isn't something from Dr. Google. This is what your doctors will follow. And look at what they say. They say that they believe that the best management of any patient with cancer is in a clinical trial. And participation in clinical trials is especially encouraged. That's not Phen saying this. This is the organization that's responsible for creating the guidelines that doctors follow. So, what do we know? Clinical trials. Wow. Yes, doesn't in a way. But what we know about this is clinical trials lead to new treatment options. Okay, so between 2021 and 2022, what you're going to see, what I'm telling you here, are some clinical trials, clinical studies that were conducted during this period of time. Just because the country was shut down, researchers were continually doing clinical trials. Patients needed to participate in clinical trials, and that's what was happening. During this period of time, and this is just an example, of the groups that we were working with, that Finn was supporting. And what you'll find is 4 clinical trials in 2021 and 2022 that were diagnostic related, targeted therapy. So you'll hear me make these statements and talk about treatment options. We'll get into more details about this throughout the year. There's a lot that we want you to understand about what's coming down the pipeline. But we had new treatment options. I refer back to that tool chest. You didn't have radiation, surgery, or watchful waiting. You now have all these new treatment options, clinical trials that generated positive information. Then the FDA approved these for treatment. So these are diagnostics, like PYLARIFY. So this is a very interesting treatment option. It's more of a targeted approach where now you have the ability to, it's like a guided missile that identifies where the cancer is in your body. And then the diagnostic will give you a nice image of where the cancer is in your body. Then there's Pluvicto. Now this was very interesting because this was extremely important, because now if you can see it, you can kill it. And now there are other drugs, combinations of the drugs, even androgen deprivation therapies that are hormone-based, received approval. And this, and I flagged this, why this was very important, because what you think is that you only have access to these, the approval of treatments were only based upon the more advanced disease, metastatic, castration-resistant disease. But this was an example of a metastatic hormone-sensitive prostate cancer. So this wasn't in an advanced stage where there's no other choice. But this therapy, hormonal-based therapy, was metastatic, but sensitive. So now we move to last year, just a couple of weeks ago. This was a very exciting year because I mentioned before that in 2003, we sequenced the whole human genome and Finn was found. And what does that mean today? Well, now that we understand the genetics of the human body, we were able to design treatments, therapies that were based upon your genetic makeup. Now, this summer, starting in July to August, there were 3 studies that had positive results, and then the FDA approved them for use in patients. Now, TALPRO-3 was one of them. PROPEL, another one. Magnitude, another one. EMBARK was another one. All these clinical trials, if you go back into our videos, we talked about this in our clinical trial rally. We supported these trials in PHENtrials.com. We were working to make sure that everyone knew about these clinical trials. So this was very important, especially the top 3 here. We're talking about the TALPRO-3, where you had a combination of a DNA repair. So this drug, or these 3 groups of drugs, have a compound, a therapy that interferes with the ability of the cancer to repair any DNA damage. So if a cancer has a break in its DNA, it'll have proteins that repair it. But if you interfere with those proteins, then the cancer can't repair it. And if the cancer can't repair it, the cancer dies, or it slows up cancerous growth. This was extremely important. Why is it important? Not only is it a new class of therapies that's extremely exciting based upon your genetic makeup, but it drives the point home why Black individuals, Black men, need to understand their genetic makeup. Because if you don't understand your genetic makeup, you don't know if you can participate in 3 of these drugs, 3 of these treatment options that are available. And then even in November, I wanted to flag this last one, Extending. This was another one by the Embark clinical trial. One of the groups that we work with, that we support, that we educate our network about. FDA approved a treatment for non-metastatic castration-sensitive prostate cancer. So now we've moved from treating the far advanced cancers, and we're continually moving forward in an earlier period of time to start to treat these cancers. And that was something that was just approved in November of 2023. So next, what we said before is that clinical trial successes lead to new treatments. And so here, I wanted to bring to your attention some 2 clinical trials that were completed, that were extremely successful. And the first one was by a company called Point Bio, and the clinical trial was SPLASH. Not only, and it's a very similar clinical trial, as I mentioned before, it has the ability to target look for a specific protein that's found on the majority of prostate cancer cells and deliver a radioactive payload. That radioactive payload is engulfed, internalized, or brought inside the cell and kills the cell. Now, we worked closely with this organization, and we had network members that participated in the clinical trial. And because of their participation in the clinical trial, they had positive results that allowed them to go on to another clinical trial and qualify for another clinical trial. That's why it's important for us to participate. Now, in addition to it being very successful and being another tool in their tool chest, the African-American enrollment was upwards to 10%. In the past, all the research out there clearly demonstrates the percentage of African-American men participating in prostate cancer clinical trials was extremely low, maybe 3 to 4%. But so we're happy to be supportive of these organizations to help drive awareness to not only Black men and Black folks, but to also all men and all people that have prostate cancer. So I wanted to put that out there because that's important. Next, this was a very interesting study. And I want to bring this up because we have a survivor who participated in this clinical trial. He'll be coming up next. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but what happens if there was a clinical trial finding that you have 2 drugs, drug A and drug B, both of them have the ability to suppress or slow the progression of prostate cancer. But what they found out is that the drug worked independently in white men. So whether or not you use drug A or drug B, if you combine them, the results were the same. But what happens if in Black men, if you combine them and they would significantly slow the progression of the disease, stop the progression of disease? So you'll be in a position to hear from a person who is a participant in this clinical trial, who'll be able to tell you his story. That's why this is exciting. This is history in the making. And you don't hear a lot about this, but you hear it here with us. And so what we want to also tell you is this. That was 2023. But we got a lot more for you in 2024. And we're just going to give you a taste of what's coming down the pipeline. And these are some of the clinical trials that we'll be supporting and you'll be hearing about from us. And AMG 509. Now, this is an immunotherapy, right? This is where you use the immune system to then rev up your immune system and fight the cancer. Then the clinical trial Lorikeet. The Lorikeet clinical trial, here, this is another immunotherapy clinical trial that uses the immune system to interfere with the ability of the cancer to slow up or interfere with your own immune system. So these are called immunotherapy, or you may hear another term, immuno-oncology. Also, another clinical trial called Libertas. Now, this is an interesting clinical trial. Normally, they will have you on therapies that modulate or suppress your androgen, your testosterone levels in your body. But what happens if you didn't have to use this continuously? What happens if you could stop for a couple of months and restart? Now, clinical trials like this clinical trial can help improve your quality of life if you're on one of these therapies. And then the last one, again, a lot of our partners are industry. We have partners who are at academic institutions. And this last clinical trial is very interesting, CHAMPS, and this is out of Duke. It's very interesting because now, guess what people are doing? Instead of it being one therapy, one shot, one bullet, you got 3 bullets in the gun. So if you have an advanced form of disease, now you're going to have 5 or 6 shots at the same time. So you remember the body is an orchestration of events that are taking place. So if you're going to fight cancer, you might do better fighting cancer with multiple shots instead of one shot on goal, one shot at a time. So again, we're not talking about what was available 20 years ago when PHEN was founded and we sequenced the whole human genome. You had surgery, radiation, and you had a hormone treatment and watchful waiting. We have a full tool chest that's available. And the more we participate in clinical trials, the more we're able to identify treatment options that are more personalized to your needs. I wanted to okay, and I mentioned this before, but again, throughout this year, you're going to hear more and more about clinical trials and why this is important. But this is a one-of-a-kind tool. And this tool was invented so what I mentioned before, this is PHENtrials.com. This helps people to identify a trial that's best for them. This is a one-of-a-kind tool. And matter of fact, first in class, created at PHEN. And I could say I have never found, and we have never seen anything like this in the world. I'll wait for somebody to correct me, but I'll step out there. And what we've done, as I mentioned before, is there are over 600 actively recruiting clinical trials in the United States. Each month, the PHEN team gets together and we go through all of the actively recruiting clinical trials. And those that are new, we take them and we put them in their respective buckets. So depending on what your diagnosis is. If your diagnosis is high risk or metastatic castration resistant, you would come to PHENTrials.com, since you know what your diagnosis is, and you can scroll down and look at all those clinical trials. Now, those groups that we work closely with, our partners, academic and industry partners that we have, we take it a step further. We create patient summaries that are so simple that you can understand it on your first read. Again, I mentioned earlier about this LORIKEET clinical trial. It gives you the basic information about it, overview, who's included, and all the contact information that you need. As you scroll down, you'll see all this information. And then, if all else fails, you can pick up the phone and contact us, and we'll help you navigate. So I wanted to stop there. Again, this is available at PHENTrials.com. And don't feel like you can't call us to help you walk through this and look for the best clinical trial for you. But this is the starting point. This is the tool that we've designed, that was created by us, that doesn't exist out there, that we've made for you. Thank you. Tom.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford. Jerry, what kind of questions do we have for Dr. Crawford? Dr. Crawford, don't run too fast. Do we have any questions here in the audience here in Boston? I see one hand. Yes, sir.
I guess you can hear me. I was interested in what is, through these clinical trials, what is the most common that you've heard of side effects from the medicines from these clinical trials? What is the most side effects a person can go through?
You know, that's very interesting. So
Mhm.
you asked me what I hear from the patients. And I don't hear a lot about side effects. I hear a lot about how good they feel. And if there is side effects that they mention, it's overshadowed by the improvement in the quality of life, the happiness that they feel that they participated in clinical trial, that there are options that are available. So each one of these categories, you may have a general group of side effects. And immunotherapies may have an immune-related side effects. Hormone therapies may have fatigue. Just the standard side effects that you've already heard before. It's not anything that's too new. But your question was related to what have I heard? Really haven't heard a lot from anyone about side effects.
I see we have
Yes, I would like to know if there are any non-pharmaceutical clinical trials.
So the question is there any non-pharmaceutical clinical trials? Yes, there are non-pharmaceutical clinical trials. There are clinical trials where you can work with the group with exercise, diet, how to manage the stress, depression. So there's a lot out there. Surveys that you could take. And then there was one clinical trial where the feedback that I got on that was extremely exciting. A lot of men who were depressed, fatigued, started taking Ritalin. And it started boosting their energies. So even those simple clinical trials, where there's something that's already approved to see whether it can improve their quality of life, that's out there. So we welcome you to opportunity. So let's help you find something. Also, we had a clinical trial that was based upon, and let's say, there's a clinical trial called the Promise Registry. And this clinical trial or registry is a free genetic test. You don't have to pay anything. They send a kit to your house. It's saliva. And there's not a lot of slots left. So if you haven't requested, you can go to our site, look at the Promise Registry and pull that information down and get in the system before there's no more free tests available.
What's the site that you go to for that?
You can go to PHENtrials.com. If you go to our patient summary, or you can just type in Promise Registry and it'll come up on the site.
Promise Registry.
Yes. And if you can't find it, you know what our number is. Okay? So if you can't find it, you can always call us and we'll help you.
They'll help you as well. I've already signed up
Yeah, see,
and they will help you.
they will help you because we want to make sure there's about 14, maybe 1,300 slots available out of 5,000. And if it's free, and we know that Black folks need to participate, especially those with prostate cancer. So this is a prostate cancer related clinical study.
Could you go over the genetic testing a little bit, the purpose of it and how they do it? And what they're gonna discover?
The Promise Registry?
No, the genetic testing.
I mean, I can go over it a little bit afterwards
Okay.
and we can go into detail.
Great, thank you.
Because you bring up a very excellent point, because the short answer to that is that a good gene, for example, is the BRCA gene. Now, a lot of folks, and the majority of people in the audience probably thought the BRCA1 gene was associated with breast cancer. Folks didn't know that the BRCA1 gene is associated with prostate cancer in men. So again, we have videos online at PHENTV, but we're always open. We can talk about this a little bit more in detail, and we can talk about the relationship between the BRCA1 mutation and the PARP inhibitors. That's those therapies I was telling you about that interfere with the ability of the cancer to kill, to repair its DNA, and forces the cancer to go down this path where it starts to die.
I think we have another question here. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Where these clinical trials are at, would I have to go to the place where they are, or like I live in Boston, and the clinical trial is wherever? Can I still be involved in a clinical trial even though I live here?
Yeah.
Or do I have to go out there?
So that's a very important point. So when the sponsors are promoting their clinical trial, they'll select sites like the Dana-Farber to host and manage their clinical trial site. So if there's a clinical trial that you're interested in, there may be multiple places throughout the country, even at the Dana-Farber. But if you don't find it here, there may be some that's very close. We have three locations, three major locations between Beth Israel, the Dana-Farber, and Mass General. That's a lot of clinical trials in our city. We got a lot of them. Even if you have to travel to another location, there are certain groups that will pay for your transportation. Not only pay for your transportation, pay for your hotel stay, and pay for your transportation back. So again, look for it, and if you find something, let us help you.
I just wanted to say, thank you for that information, Dr. Crawford. That's very helpful to what my particular issues are.
Okay. Do we have any other questions here?
I have
Yes.
an online.
I think do we have a couple online, Jerry?
Yes.
Oh, well, we're gonna take this one first and then we'll go. Yes.
Just wanted to ask again, so how do you get to this Promise Registry, like Phen?
Well, I mean, what I'll do is on yours, I'll just take you there, but after we speak, if you wait and after we finish, I'll take
Okay.
you there and show you how to get there.
But for those who are not here, it's PHENtrials.com. And you can search for the Promise Registry.
Right.
Okay.
You will find it.
So it's in there.
All right. Jerry, what's the question you have?
Okay. Question one. Can one of the speakers address whether known BRCA2 mutation, known at the initial PSA diagnosis, affect the choice of treatment? It seems
You're
there
going to speak up, Jerry.
Oh, So it says, can one of the speakers address whether a known BRCA2 mutation known at the time of initial PSA diagnosis affect the choice of treatment?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is yes. It could directly affect what your treatment choices are, depending on what stage you are in the disease process. But also, it will also impact your family and be of benefit to your family. So the answer to that is yes. But again, once you speak with your doctor, you sit with your primary care, your doctor, and then both of you can share in the decision-making process about your care once they understand your genetic information.
Okay, there's a part 2. It seems there is conflicting information as to the effectiveness of radiation in the face of BRCA2 mutations.
Trying to repeat the question. I'm not sure our online audience heard it.
Okay, there's a second part. It seems there is conflicting information as to the effectiveness of radiation in the face of BRCA2 mutations.
Okay, as relating to prostate cancer or as relating to cancer in general? And so
Yes,
we don't have-
prostate cancer.
With prostate cancer. These are the things that they're starting to develop clinical trials and investigating. So as the person said, there is mixed information that's out there. That's why it's important. And matter of fact, that's why it's important that the majority, more and more diverse people from different backgrounds participate in clinical trials. Because the majority of genetic information that is used to create these therapies are based upon people of European ancestry. Blacks and Hispanics fall into maybe a 1% bucket. That's not a lot. So yes, there should be some conflict because you have a mixture of people in the United States. And that's what clinical trials are trying to address now. That's what we're pushing. That's what we're educating everyone. We want people to participate so we can better answer those questions.
Yes, sir.
My question is that how do you feel about FIN educating the community to become more participants in more clinical trials to become a more effective for the whole United States of people getting healed from prostate cancer?
I mean, that is why we are here today. Because Tom will tell you, we can go back to 20 years ago, 21 years ago, when they did Dendrion had a stem cell or dendritic cell based therapy. Now it was approved by the FDA in 2010. But do you know it took 78 years to figure out and collect enough information to figure out that, oh, wait a second, it looks like Black men do extremely well and live longer on this clinical trial. So there's a whole population in a period of 7 years that didn't know that and could not take advantage of it. The other thing that you said was it's just not for Black people. The more you know about the differences in effects, the more you can create or design or create studies for every group of people that exist in the United States. So it's very important that we participate, not just for ourselves, but for everyone, and including our family.
Okay, well, I'm gonna, Dr. Crawford, don't go anywhere, but I do want to say one thing before we introduce our next speaker. We were founded, when we founded FIN in 2003. That's been a long time ago, you know, it's 21 years. I can't believe 21 years ago that I was standing here, in fact, in Dana-Farber, trying to figure out how to move forward with our mission of eliminating the prostate cancer racial disparity, which is the largest disparity for any major cancer for men and women. Now, what our approach has been is education. Knowledge is the best defense against prostate cancer. It's education and developing tools so that Black patients and promoting those tools to Black patients so we can use them to really address the lack of knowledge and eliminating the disparity. Now, where we are today, and we've seen results of that. I know, Richard, you asked that question of what we're doing and how it impacts. we've seen on clinical trials that the trials that we promote and work with the sponsors with have a higher participation of Black patients. That goes a long ways in addressing the racial disparity. Because number one, as Dr. Crawford pointed out, now we have access to these treatments at an earlier stage. And number two, we know how they're going to impact on Black men. And we see some cases where they impact, very well. So as we get that information, we're fighting to eliminate that disparity. That is the reason we have PHENtrials.com, and the reason we have PHENPath, and the reason that we have PHENPSA. Those are our three portals that we really promote as resources for the public and within the Black community. So we're making progress. We have a lot of progress to make yet, but we are making progress. So, I call on all the people here and online to really understand how to use these tools. PHENtrials. If you're a prostate cancer survivor, I'm a survivor, and I like to know what's going on. I regularly look at clinical trials. I don't necessarily think I need one, but I want to know what's going on out there. You never know. So, we all have a little free time. So sometimes instead of my looking at the sports page, I'm saying, hey, let me go to PHENtrials, see what's going on. Let me go to PHENPath and kind of see what is happening on this side. So I encourage you, please, we can make a hell of a difference. We are making a hell of a difference. We can make a larger difference. But, I want us to get in a position when these trials are announced that we can clearly say, we know we're going to have 20% Black patients in there. We know who they are. They're members of our network. They're members in the community that we reach. And we know we can introduce these trials and get participation in these trials. Once we get that, then we're taking giant steps. You see a horse run, take out little steps, and then people start taking the long strides. We're still taking little steps. We're trying to get to the position of taking these long strides. So with that, that's long-winded. Hope you understand what Dr. Crawford has presented and what I tried to summarize in some kind of fashion. Did I do all right with that, Dr. Crawford?
Hey.
All right,
That's
good. All right. Now, what we're going to do is to introduce our patient for his patient story. And I actually wanted Dr. Crawford to do that because it's about a clinical trial. So, and the trial that he was on. So you can come back here, introduce Art Kane, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Okay. So Tom mentioned about our next speaker. His name is Art Kane. And he's a network member and he's an advocate for prostate cancer. And he's outspoken. And he's a person who has advanced disease and participated in a clinical trial. He's one of the people that had combinations of therapy that work better than each one of them by themselves. So, Art Kane?
Yes, sir.
The floor is yours.
Okay, well, first of all, I say Happy New Year to everyone, and I'm happy to be here. Not only here to talk about my journey, but just to be here, period. The prognosis was not real great when I was first diagnosed. I was diagnosed on January the 14th in 2015. I got tested on the month or two before that. They looked at my Gleason at my prostate, and I had a Gleason score of 8. So effectively, according to the doctors I was working with, had stage 4 prostate cancer. I probably had prostate cancer actually well before I was diagnosed, but my journey began at that point. I chose radiation, and when I say radiation, I took external beam radiation and radium seeds. That was about April, May. At that time, we were doing 6 to 8 weeks. So that was about April, May of 2015. I waited and I waited. And as it turned out, my PSA didn't go down, it went up. My PSA was about between 5 and 6 when I was initially diagnosed. It went up to, at one point, over 20, 21 or 22. So that was after initial treatment. I then reached out to a medical oncologist here in Atlanta, and they started me on ADT, essentially Lupron, and I also had Exgeva as a bone strengthener. And my PSA came down, and it came down significantly, but it was sort of short term, at least for me, because I wanted to of course, live longer. So I started to try to look at what the alternatives were. And I'll just say this for folks who are out there, one of the things I really feel that's important, if you're a patient, you really need to try to educate yourself as much as possible on what exists. Work with great communication with your medical team. You have to have that kind of communication. I'll skip a few steps here. Ultimately, I ended up going to Duke and connected with Dr. Daniel George. And what he recommended was the PHENPath clinical trial, which was combination therapy. And that combination therapy included taking apalutamide, which is also Erlita, and abiraterone acetate with prednisone. And so that was at the end of 2019. When I went to Duke, my PSA had gone from roughly under 2 back up to between 5 and 6, and it was doubling. So what actually was happening, I had gotten to a point that I was starting to progress again, and I was very concerned. So I went to Duke. We started Panther shortly thereafter, and I can't tell you exactly the months that we started to see real results, but shortly thereafter, we started to see a really great response from the combination of those two drugs with prednisone. I was on Panther for 2 years. About August, after the first year, my PSA had actually come down to 0.01. In other words, it was undetectable. And it has been undetectable since I got on Panther. I've been off Panther for at least a year, maybe 2 years now. I've been off Panther 2 years, and I'm still undetectable. Now, I will say also this: before I chose to get on the Panther clinical trial, I happened to go to PHEN annual conference in Washington, D.C. I saw Dr. George there, and I heard the speakers that you are seeing now talk about clinical trials. So that was another thing that was convincing for me, that patient support from PHEN, my connection with that network made a real difference in some of my decision making, and also in just that education that I mentioned that I think is very important for patients. if I had any takeaways, I would say educate yourself, communicate, investigate the clinical trials as you've heard so far, and then take advantage of networks, patient support networks like PHEN. So long story short, I went from what I thought was almost a death sentence diagnosis when I was first diagnosed to having my PSA currently undetectable. And the other thing I'll mention, because I've had a great relationship with Dr. George. That's another thing that came out today. If you're on a clinical trial, the relationship you have with your physician is much greater. And that's important. I had another physician tell me early on, you need a good cook in the kitchen. And I've had that in this clinical trial. So I think some of the messaging from PHENPath is when you compared the participants, Black and white participants in PHENPath, the benefit has been twice as great for Blacks or African Americans than it has been for whites. Progression has, and again, this is just for the length of the 2-year study, but progression for whites has been about 15 months, white men, and for African American men, it has been 30 months. So I think that's very significant. The other thing I'll say is what I've heard today is advocacy for more participation in clinical trials by African Americans, because there appears to be genetic and biological differences. In PHENPath, there were close to 100 participants, 50 white and 43 Black. So we were getting close to that 50% number, not 2%, not 20%, but close to half of the participants were African American. So that research is more reliable, I think, because you did have more African American participation. So I'll stop right here. If I can share it in any other way, I'll be happy to do that. But the results for me have been fantastic, and I'm very thankful.
Thank you.
Okay. You want to ask some questions?
Okay.
Yes.
So I wanted you to highlight some stuff to the audience. You were diagnosed with stage 4 disease. Correct.
That's right.
I'm saying it again. Stage 4 disease. That means the cancer has left outside the prostate, and maybe around the area of the prostate or other parts of the body. So, go ahead, Art.
No, and I'll just interject even more specifically. I wish I had taken some more notes to better give you details. I actually had bone metastasis. Initially, when I thought about my treatment, they did a bone scan, and it seemed to be that I didn't have metastasis. But bone scans were not necessarily as sensitive or accurate as some of the scans that you talked about earlier today. And so, as I mentioned, even after treatment, initial treatment, my PSA went up. They initially did not identify the metastasis. So my PSA continued to rise. And at some point in August of 2015, I was diagnosed as having stage 4 prostate cancer.
So that's important. I wanted to highlight that for the audience. And then I want you to tell the audience how many years your PSA has been 0 or undetectable.
So, I was diagnosed 7 years ago, and I'm still here. I started Panther 4 years ago, and 3 years ago, it fell well beyond 2, and then 1, and then August after the first year, not quite the year, it became undetectable, and it's been undetectable since. So I would say it's been undetectable for about 3 years.
So you see that. And I want everyone here in attendance and everybody online that's listening. This is someone who participated in the clinical trial. He didn't pass in 6 months. Is there anyone have any questions in the audience who would like to ask Art?
Yeah. Yes, I want to ask you, was there any place in Georgia that you were able to get the kind of health care that you were looking for?
So we have Emory here, which is a great medical facility. We have a couple other facilities dedicated just to treating prostate cancers, which is where I went. One of the things that I've learned in getting information through patient support groups is don't be afraid to travel. That was one of the key directives, key things that I was always told, and I believe that. If, for example, there's a clinical trial that can best help you, don't be afraid to travel. So we have a good facility here, but it was essentially standard of care. They wouldn't give you the same treatment. The creativity was not there. You get the creativity in the clinical trials. But you may have to travel to get that. So I made that decision when I reached out to Dr. George at Duke. And again, having been to Phen before I even started Panther in 2019.
Thank you for that.
I have one other point I want to bring up. Could you tell us what kind of extracurricular activities do you do?
So I've also heard the question about non-pharmaceutical possibilities. So I do a number of things along those lines because I've seen some research, not that I think that some of these non-pharmaceuticals are things that you should rely on completely. But I do vitamin D, K, I do lycopene, fish oil. So there are things I do in the vitamin realm, in the supplement realm, that I don't know if they're making a difference, but there's a strong possibility. In addition to that, I exercise. I'm a runner. I have been a runner most of my life. I am in a running group, South Fulton Running Partners. This particular group has run every weekend on Saturday since 1979. I haven't been a part of the group that long, but I'm a 20-year member of that group. So I think exercise, at least for me, maybe has some some benefit in having me continue to feel healthy.
And I wanted to also bring attention, there's 2 things I wanted to bring up here. When we start talking about clinical trials, and there's clinical trials that involve exercise and diet also. And in our summit, we had guest speakers who are actively doing that type of clinical trial research. Exercise and diet are extremely important. So we're on the right track. One other thing I wanted to point out was something you said about, there was a drug you used called Xgeva for your protective bones. He's an avid runner, so if he would have fractured, because he had disease that was all over his body, so that means the cancer itself could have weakened his bones. So by taking drugs like that to keep his bones healthy, that allowed him to continue to do the things that he loved. Any more questions?
Yeah, and having gone through this physiologic, I mean, your physical self, what do you think were the signs that made you aware that you had prostate cancer?
So I was a runner, and my wife and I, who's from the Chicago area, we were in the Chicago area, in and around Northwestern, and I went out for a run along Lake Michigan, and I just didn't feel right. You know, I felt like there was something going on. Again, you know, I had been to my primary care physician in 2012, and probably my prostate cancer goes back at least that far, but I did not follow up, and I was not, and I was not reached out to. And so 2 years later, in 2014, roughly September, October, I didn't feel right running. You know, I didn't feel right with my breathing, and I kind of know my body. So I went back to my primary care physician. He saw that my PSA was between 5 and 6, as I mentioned earlier. He recommended that I go to a urologist, and we did a biopsy in November of 2014. And again, as I mentioned before, I was diagnosed on January 14th of 2015. And it's a shocking diagnosis. As you might know, a cancer diagnosis is very shocking.
Thank you.
And Tom is coming back up. I have one other question to ask you about. What was your age? How old were you when you were diagnosed?
Okay, I'm 71 right now. So that was 7 years ago. So do the math. Early 60s. Yes. 63. I was 63, 64.
Were they testing your PSA every year?
They did not. They did not test it every year. They did not, you know, I got it tested in 2014, and I would say it was under 2. Okay. And I came back in 2014 when I had this uncomfortableness when I was running, and it had gone from below under 0.2 up to between 5 and 6. So as a precautionary measure, he sent me to a urologist, and I tested positive. In other words, the Gleason score after the biopsy was a Gleason 8.
But, all right, it's good to see you. And I'm glad you're doing good on that clinical trial to do. And I'm glad you're part of the PHEN network. I think your story will be very helpful and very enlightening to a lot of patients, and will help us, you know, get more men willing to participate in a clinical trial that can be life-saving. And I think your story clearly shows that. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you and all you do.
Thank you. And I will have a few other remarks, but the thing that we're going to do right now is that we have a poll question. So Jerry, I want you to release our polls for our online audience. And our audience here, I think you have those questions in front of you. So we would like for you to participate in this as well. Now, you know, I was very happy, number one, to hear Art's story and to understand that he's doing well. And I'm going to say to all of our survivors and patients out there that, again, if you need a treatment and you are a survivor, a clinical trial is an option. It's an option. So what you have to do is to really go to PHENPath, and if you are at high risk or metastatic, then click there, and you can really see what your options are. And as Dr. Crawford pointed out earlier, give us a call. Give us a call. We will work with you. Our job is to help save lives. And so we can do that with your touching base with us and letting us be your partner. So thank you for that. Now, each week we will have a Managing Your Survivorship presentation, and we will also have each week a patient story, because tonight we looked at 3 areas. We looked at men newly diagnosed with prostate cancer and what the guidelines are there and what they should know when looking at their treatment options. Dr. Smith gave us that presentation. We also then looked at clinical trials. And what Dr. Crawford did was to try to make you aware that in just recent years, and he gave you a picture from 2020 through 2023 of clinical trials that have been successful, which means that they have met their goals and there have been approval by the FDA for new therapies and new diagnostics based upon those trials. He highlighted that information. That's a breakthrough for patients. He also outlined clinical trials that we are focused on for 2024. These are trials that are available to you now. And then Arcane just finished his story about his positive experience on clinical trials. So those were the things that we covered tonight. And we hope that it was beneficial to you because we want you to continue to come to these meetings. Again, it can be helpful to you, and you can help us with your stories and with your involvement with what it is that we do in communities around the country. So now what I'm going to do is to take a few minutes to look at our poll and what we've gotten back from our online audience. Jerry, you probably have to help me with this. I guess our first question, were you satisfied with this meeting and the presentation content? 92% said yes, 4% said somewhat, and 4% said no. So we have work to do. We've got to get that 4% who said no to say yes. So thank you for that feedback. We're going to work to be perfect. The next question is, how do you rate the speakers? And 96% said very good. Jerry, can you scroll down for me so I can? Okay. Okay, how do you rate the speakers? 96% says very good. Yeah, stay with us. Okay, right there. Don't go too fast. Back up a little bit. Back up a little bit. And we have 4% says fair. Do you know what factors found on the pyramid help determine your risk level? 74% says yes. So we got that message across. 22% says somewhat, and 4% said no. I got to find that 4% person. We need to bring in those special education class and work with him to get him up to speed. Do you understand how your risk levels determine your treatment options? 8 and 9% said yes, 5% said somewhat, and 5% said no. The next question, do you understand how your life expectancy influences available treatment options? I'm glad you got that message again. 79% says yes, 16% said somewhat, and we got that other person out there that we're gonna work with. The next question, did you understand the clinical trials highlights and the patient benefits? 84% says yes, 16% says somewhat, and that other person got this, Keith. So, we didn't have anybody says no. Did you understand the PHEN trials portal information presented? 84% says yes, 11% says somewhat. Did you find the patient story educational and inspirational? 89% says yes, 11% said somewhat. Did the program allow adequate time for audience Q&A? 74% said yes, 21% said somewhat. And if we look at who were in that, our online audience, 78% were prostate cancer patient or survivor, 11% wife of a caregiver, 1% advocate. Okay, so we had our audience. We had mostly patients and caregivers. I mean, patients and survivors. So those were the, that's what we got back. Our online audience, we have, not everybody participated in the poll. Our online audience, I think, reached around 50. We currently have 36 people that are still with us. So anybody here have any other questions for us this evening? So what I would like to say to those of you here, thank you for making the trip to Dana-Farber. We really appreciate your being here. For those of you who are online, thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. And we wish you the best. We hope you have a good month, and we will see you in February. Thank you and good night.